As a Christian working woman, you have many roles, from your responsibility with family and friends to community and work. How do you connect all that you do with all that you are and still have your faith shine through? It's a challenge, but you are up to it. The She Works for Him podcast is the gathering place to empower Christian working women to live out their calling at work by connecting them to God, resources, and each other through powerful faith stories from other working sisters in Christ. Welcome to She Works for Him.
You've tuned in to She Works for Him, where we connect Christian working women to God, resources, and one another. We are your hosts, Martha Brangenberg and Katherine Gates, and you can find us online at sheworksforhim.com. That is sheworks4him.com. And you can use that same She Works for Him on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube to connect with us on social media, as well as finding us on your favorite podcast platform. And please take a moment, and if you get a chance, if this episode really impacts you or you just love what you're hearing here, please leave us a review on your podcast platform on Apple, and then also share it with a friend. If you can just even share it with one person that you know, it might make a difference, what an impact that can have for the kingdom.
Absolutely. And Martha, it's easy for all of us to fall into the assumption trap, that insidious pit that typically influences our beliefs and perceptions about others and ourselves for the worst, right? We need people who are willing to call those assumptions out and to help us see through the lies so we can experience the freedom to be fully present, collaborative, and self-expressed. That's when we can bring our best forward and contribute to success. Adele LaCombe has been blessed with a boss who not only brings out the best in her, but is also committed to helping others live their best lives. The woman she reports to is also her mother, Debbie Macomber. Debbie is a #1 New York Times bestselling author and publisher of the Debbie Macomber magazine. Debbie is known as the official storyteller of Christmas, and several of her books have been crafted into original Hallmark Channel movies. Adele oversees the day-to-day operations of the business, manages company partnerships, and serves on several boards, including the Anchor Gathering, Youth for Christ Foundation, Hope Squared, and Kitsap Regional Library Foundation. Adele also participates on the National Leadership Council for World Vision. On at least one of those boards, Adele serves alongside some very powerful men, and they've been vocal about how much they value Adele's perspective as the only woman in the room, which has helped Adele find the confidence to share more freely. Adele has traveled to Africa and the Middle East with World Vision, but she's happiest when she's surrounded with friends and family, including her husband, Kevin, and their 3 children. Adele, welcome to She Works for Him.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
It is so good. We've been waiting for this conversation, and we are going to talk about how you connect your faith to your work and what that looks like for you. But first, Adele, we'd love to hear how you became a follower of Jesus.
So I have always had Jesus in my life. I grew up in the church, but, it wasn't until I had my son in 1997. I was a new mom. And I realized I had no idea how to be a mom. I was scared. All of a sudden I had this responsibility, this child, and I wanted to insulate myself from my husband. And I just wanted this child in me to, I just felt this responsibility, and my husband was doing everything wrong. It was a really interesting time in my life. And I found we started going back to church. I had not attended as a married couple. We've been married in 1992. And so we went with my parents on holidays. And so I started going back regularly. And women's Bible study, I started attending. It was called Titus 2. And this woman out of Arizona, her name was Naomi, and she would do these audio cassettes. And I felt like I listened to this woman. And I was at her feet, in the couch at her feet as she did these audios called Titus 2, the older women teaching the younger women how to be keepers of the home. And I just learned what it was to be a wife and a mother. And everything started to make sense. And nothing I knew was right. nothing that came natural to me was right. I needed to learn from Christ and from his word what it was to be a wife and a mother. My natural instincts were wrong. And from that, Kevin came to know Jesus. The men of the church, he had grown up Catholic, so he had a religious background, but he didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus. And we just thrived in this environment during that time. And I had 2 more kids. And so just a really rich time of he and I just diving into relationship with Jesus, with each other, with their children, and then individually with, just the scriptures ourselves, making sure we were rooted in our faith. So.
Wow, that's powerful. And that's amazing. I understand because I was raised Catholic. So just at that time, not really understanding about the relationship, right? So how does that relationship with Christ not only influence, obviously it's influenced how you've mothered and how you've done, your part as a spouse, as a wife. How has that influenced your work?
Well, okay, because my mom, she raised me in the faith, and I say I work for the family business. It's a global enterprise. So it's just mom I work beside, 200 million books in print. She is as authentic a believer as anyone I know. It really is. She serves as a guidepost on the Guidepost Advisory Board. And there was an opportunity where I have to say this because it's so, this is the roots that I grew up. This is the DNA that my mom is. We were in this room and they said, okay, if you've read through the Bible in a year, stand up. And so she was standing in this room. And then they said, okay, if you've read through it 5 times, continue standing. These are like pillars of the faith in this room. She was the last person standing. She had read through the scriptures every single year for the last 45 years. I mean, she just is so anchored in her faith, and she has built a company. And our mission statement is to be a blessing. And so my work is not necessarily to come in and punch in a time clock. It is to be a blessing. It is more about working into what Christ has called us to be than anything else. The reason I serve on boards is because I choose here to be a blessing. I want to take my time and invest it in other organizations. If I have something to offer that another organization can benefit from and they're serving the kingdom, then I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that. That is the best use of my time on behalf of my work here as possible. So it's so integrated in what I do. And I honor her by doing that. As there's no conflict there to me be doing that. Yeah.
You're so blessed to be in that environment where that is a part of the DNA. But even there, as a Christian working woman, there must be areas that you actually still have struggles with as a Christian working woman. Catherine alluded to the fact that you're on a lot of boards as well. And so talk about maybe one area where you have had a big struggle as a Christian working woman.
Well, I think there is the balance in life with family. And so I do travel a lot. As you said, I've been to the Middle East and raising 3 children. And so my husband and I have really had to learn balance ourselves. And I've been married 29 years. And when we hit 25 years, we went through couples counseling because we realized that our strategy as a couple was not very good. It's actually what the enemy uses. It's called divide and conquer. That's not good strategy for a couple. And we had to decide to intentionally give up things we really, really enjoyed to invest back together. That we had to set aside things we loved so that we could make each other priority and put our intention together. Now, he doesn't love travel at all. He's happiest at home. He loves to stay at home. And so when I do travel, I love that I get to do it with my mom. And I love that I can do it with work. So that feeds that. But I have to make sure that I have don't use all of my time away from my husband, that he's a priority as well. So
And I would imagine a lot of our listeners can relate to that conversation. And what a great step you guys took in actually being proactive and saying, we need to reevaluate and redo how we're doing this life of marriage together. So when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about a victory so that we don't just leave it in that, where that struggle bus was, and what you guys did really was a victory as well, making that transition. We'll be right back with more of She Works for Him right after this.
Did you know that God has a calling on your life? It's true. He's called you to bring Jesus to the world. For some, that may look like a pulpit or a foreign mission field, but for most of us, it looks like a construction site, a cubicle, a hospital, or a classroom. Wherever it is that you work, live, volunteer, and invest, that is your mission field. To learn more about integrating your faith into your work and retirement, check out our books, I Work for Him, She Works for Him, and I Retire for Him, by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore.
Welcome back to She Works for Him with your hosts, Katherine Gates and Martha Brangenberg. And listen, I just want to encourage you, if you just were listening to the first segment or you missed the first segment, get back and listen to what Adele is sharing with us, because sometimes some of our greatest victories can come from the struggle that we are in if we realize that we need to reset and take a look at that from a new perspective. And that, Adele, that sounds like that's what you guys did with your marriage. And, I think a lot of us, especially when we get to an empty nester stage or a part in life where it's like things are going to look a little different. How are we relating as a couple and how important that is? So as we talk about that, let's switch it. As a Christian working woman, what has been one of your biggest victories that you have seen in your life?
Well, it's interesting, and maybe this isn't the direction you think I was going to go, but we never know what our children see happening in our lives. And it wasn't too long ago that my youngest son, during his spring break, I was traveling with World Vision for their conference. And I felt bad as a working mom that my 14-year-old son wouldn't have me there. So I said, come to the conference with me and you can hang out. It was in Carlsbad, California. And so he came, and I thought he and my husband could just enjoy the hotel. But he decided to go to the conference, and he ended up going to a conference on clean water, or a seminar on clean water. And he realized for the first time in his life that kids his age didn't have access to clean water around the world, and that he could change the life of a child for $50. And his mind was blown. And he sat in there and he thought, I could give a child $50 and their life would be changed. And he, in his mind, his 14-year-old mind, he said, I don't know one person in my world that wouldn't change the life of a child for that amount of money. And so as he left, he said, I'm going to go ask people if they'll join me in doing this. And that kid at 14 years old began a campaign, and he raised $75,000. That's because I made a sacrifice of going to a conference and doing a talk that had nothing to do with clean water and just invited him to come. And, so sometimes when we have to do something, and we think we're having to sacrifice for our family, actually the blessing that comes from that. And so the fruit of that. So, and now he's part of a group called Next Gen Leaders with World Vision, Next Gen Network. And those kids, there's 12 of them, just raised $422,000 for health clinics in Zambia. So,
wow.
And he's 17. So, yeah.
I just love that. You took a situation and got creative and did not box him into, no, the conference is not for you, but you really created a space for him to see what you were doing, to get involved. And we don't realize how much our kids, how much young people will just gravitate and be influenced by what they see us doing, right?
And I think, too, when a child does something, a 14-year-old child steps out and talks about something like that, adults want to help. They want to come alongside. And so as he talked to Rotary groups and civic groups, they said, we want to help. They just stepped in, and his goal is to raise $25,000, and two families, and they were not my family and they were not my mom, because we were not going to take over his campaign. This was his campaign. Too easy for us to turn it into our campaign. We weren't going to do that. Two families came in and said, we will match if you do this. And they were not me and my mom. And I wasn't smart enough to think, hey, I'm going to bring him to a conference. He's going to go to a clean water campaign and change the world.
Yeah.
I just thought he might hang out at the pool. That's all I could envision as a mom.
I love it.
God sees so much bigger than we do. And so I love that we serve a God like that. I love that. I love that he has such bigger vision than we do.
Yes. That's fantastic. And so Adele, when you're looking at growing the business, when you're dealing with personnel decisions and challenges, what does it look like for you to lean on your faith to make those decisions?
Yeah. So, I think that when it comes to Debbie and what she's built for 40 years, oftentimes I get the benefit of victory a lot of times because Mom's built a career. It took her she says it took her 25 years to become an overnight success. Yeah. And what she built at this time is successful. And so I get to walk in and be successful. And that's really great. But there are times when I don't get to wear that hat, that I walk into a room and I realize, wow, I have so many struggles that I walk into. And so I realize I'm kind of putting in it's easier for me to put in a different experience here because of that, Catherine, that maybe can be more relatable. I was recently asked to become a trustee for Youth for Christ. And so I'm sorry, I'm kind of pivoting, but
that's fine.
Will help. They had me fill out an application to apply to be a trustee. And I was like, nope, I'm not worthy. I don't have the credentials. I don't have awards. I don't have a degree. I'm not qualified. And I was like backpedaling. And I said to the CEO, I said this, I can't fill this out. I'm not. And he said, Adele, we have talked as a committee. We want you to apply. We consider you qualified. Don't disqualify yourself. And it was a reminder for me how I disqualify myself. It's nice to have my mom's credentials to walk in, but when I try and come in under my own, oftentimes I disqualify myself. And so I think that because, it's easy for me to, oftentimes I get to hide sometimes, I don't have to, sometimes. Yeah, you get what I mean, ladies, right?
Yes. The thing is, Adele, I hope that every woman listening takes that on for herself. How often do we disqualify ourselves when actually, degree or no degree, right? All the right credentials or not, we actually have a very valuable perspective and gifts and talents that would contribute to the success of the organization or that situation. Right. So before we end the segment, though, I'd love to hear you shared that you're on boards with men and sometimes you're the only woman with a bunch of really like men who were generals, right, in the military, corporate CEOs, and you've been able to share your perspective. I mean, this so relates to that situation. Talk a little bit about that and how you've had the freedom to do that. I serve on a foundation board, the executive team. And so it's with an admiral and a senator and a CEO right. And myself. He's retired now. And I don't even know how I get in that room, right? I am. But I love that they value and invest in me in that room. And I just want to say to the women out there, if you're invited in, you show up. This is an opportunity for us to be in. The doors are open for us. This is the perfect time for us to be in there. Be in there, show up, lean in. And they have been investing in me in ways I can't even explain. I don't know if 10 years from now, the same opportunity will be available to women that are today. I'm not qualified to be in there. Quite honestly, I'm not, but they're bringing me in and they're finding and bringing out of me qualities that I can develop during this time. They will help me develop. And I'm loving that because of the season we're in. And so women lean in. If they're giving to you, show up, lean in, be vulnerable, stay in there. And if you're in that room and you see another woman, draw her out, please. Invite her in, make her feel welcome. It's so hard to show up.
Adele, you make such a great point. When we come back, I want to talk just a little bit more about this whole idea of women showing up with who they really are and not who people think they need to be. So we'll be right back with more from She Works for Him.
As women, we like to share our special finds with others. That new little shop we just discovered or a favorite brand that is having a sale. Well, I have a special find for you. The Awaken Podcast Network is a collection of podcasts gathered onto a digital platform with you in mind. No more searching and wondering if the content is relevant. The work has already been done. Awaken Podcast Network even has smaller collections of podcasts focused on specific topics, including a collection called She Works for Him, dedicated to content for Christian working women. So go ahead, unlock God's purpose for your work, and check out awakenpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome back to She Works for Him with your hosts, Katherine Gates and Martha Brangenberg. We're here with Adele LaCombe, and she's talking about her experience as a Christian working woman. And one of the things that, Adele, we really are leaning into is some of these boards that you've been on, opportunities to be in a room with mostly men, which is a very typical way that we see ourselves sometimes. What is something that you have experienced personally that you could share that really showed just God's favor on you as a woman in that room, and how the women listening to this podcast can take something from that?
I serve on a foundation board and I oversee a grants committee. And I can't say I had the confidence to step into that. And part of it was to set up a scholarship fund for some youth that were part of it that would get these scholarships. And I was doing it with an admiral. And he'd done these before, and he led the process, and I did very little of the work. He did at least 90% of it. And then when we presented to the board later the work that we had done, and he shared what I had done on this grants committee as part of the scholarship, and he spoke this truth, I couldn't believe all the kind things and generous things he said about me. And yet I knew him to be the one who'd done it. And it was just such a great investment of his kindness and generosity towards me. And I received it. I was grateful that he had taken the time. And I know he's someone who has led thousands of men. This is a leader of men, and that he had taken the time to invest in me. And I thought, I just received that. I was like, man, and I learned. He's such a humble man. I just learned from that. I want to be someone like that takes someone that is, I'm walking beside and just speak to them, speak truth into them, and lead them that way.
The power of the word, whether we're speaking it to other women or men that we work with, but you had that opportunity to receive that in a room that really lifted you up. And I think that there's so much value in that and the confidence that it can give you to carry forward. So with that in mind, Adele, what leaders, is there a specific leader or somebody that you can just share with the audience that you are following that helps you to get inspiration and to help you in your daily life as a leader?
That is so easy. It is 100% my mom. Mm-hmm. It's why I work for her. Before I worked for her, I was at Girl Scouts, and Juliette Lowe is a wonderful woman who began an organization over 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I realized I didn't want to spend my time investing in her when my mentor is my mom, and she has impacted women's lives so gently and lovingly and kindly for just over and over again. She just, she has been there in the kindest way. Her stories changed their lives. I could tell you story after story of the way that she does it in such a kind way. And just her story, just through a story, just picking up a book and reading a book, and God uses it to reach them at a time when they need it most. And I wanted that, like the fact that that's my mama. I love it. And so she is, and and this is kind of funny, and I'm using this loosely. Okay. So I love that just like Jesus got to take his father's mission and expand it, I get to take my mama's mission and expand it. And how I get to I feel a little bit like, I don't want to say that my mom's God and I'm Jesus, but there's a little bit to that, but not in a religious way, not in a spiritual way, but my work is a little bit like that, and it's pretty cool. So
that's so awesome. What a privilege and how
not
fun.
Over speaking, right?
No. And we are supposed to model Jesus, right? So, hey, Adele, we've got to wrap up. But if you have one piece of wisdom that you would love to make sure you leave our listeners with, what would that be?
Invest in other women. Let's love on each other. Let's love on each other.
Good Amen. Word. Amen. Adele, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time and investing your time in this show right here. And we just hope that it has a really positive influence on a lot of women. Thank you so much, Adele.
Thank you for having me. You ladies are amazing.
Great to have you with us. You've been listening to She Works for Him with your hosts, Catherine Gates and Martha Brangenberg. We're Christian working women helping other Christian working women to live out their calling at work as she works for Him.
As Christian women, we have many roles, from daughter, sister, friend, wife, and mother to analyst, accountant, executive, or educator. Is it possible to balance our roles at work and home in a way that honors God? The answer is yes, and our new book, She Works for Him, will help show you how. Written to celebrate, encourage, and equip women in the workforce, She Works for Him discusses the diverse experiences of today's Christian working woman. Pick up a copy by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore. You've been listening to the She Works for Him podcast with your hosts, Catherine Gates, Nadia Dixon, and Martha Brangenberg. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube under She Works for Him. And to access any of the resources we mentioned on today's show, see the show notes at sheworksforhim.com. That's sheworks4him.com. This podcast was created to empower you to live out your calling at work so the world knows she works for Him.